As I drove this week to the research orchard where Ulster Corps volunteers have been gleaning apples and pears for distribution to feeding programs, I passed by a vineyard. It looked pretty and peaceful and vineyardy. You know, rows and rows of neatly pruned vines, leaves beginning to turn in the early autumn, clusters of grapes ready for harvest, all kind of tranquil and glistening in the morning mist. It was quintessential vineyard, just the way you think it ought to look. After I got home, just for kicks, I typed vineyard into Google and clicked to search for images of vineyard. Instantly, my screen presented over 400 images of vineyards, though a handful were for high-end real estate on Martha's Vineyard. I justified this apparent gratuitous use of my time by reasoning that since this week's gospel lesson for the third week in a row has Jesus teaching with a parable involving vineyards, surely a conscientious preacher should try to understand vineyards. Pouring a glass of wine would have been quicker, but that would have been an evasion of my duty to spend time scrolling through pretty, happy pictures. And what an array of beautiful pictures it was. From Australia to North Texas, California to Italy, Armenia to the Hudson Valley, the pictures exude contentment, possibility, and abundance. Some are panoramic views, often with a rising or setting sun lighting the vines. Some are close-ups of plump grapes, and others show how the vineyard on view will set up beautifully for your vineyard wedding. A few images show a bottle of a vineyard's finished wine next to a glass in which the wine is dazzling. There are also a few pictures of proud vineyard owners or winemakers holding the fruits of their labors, either a basket of grapes or a glass of wine. And some of these proud folk look to be ancient Italian guys, and some of them look to be second career semi-retired couples, apparently bemused to find themselves doing this after their supercharged careers in Silicon Valley or high finance. The inclusion of a single picture of a young black woman who's manager of a California vineyard jumped off the screen for me, and I realized how white the few people in the pictures are, and then how few people are in the pictures at all. I eventually circled back to Jesus' use of vineyard stories in the Gospel of Matthew. This week's is in Matthew 21. And what gives these parables their punch, even 2,000 years after Jesus criticized the chief priests and Pharisees with them, is what they say about the people in the vineyard. Who's working? Who's counting on someone else to do the work for them? How trustworthy is the landowner? How trustworthy are the tenants? How are the people in the vineyard treating one another, and how are the relations between the owners and the laborers? I scrolled back through those 400 plus beautiful photos of award-winning vineyards to see how many pictures showed people doing what you might reasonably consider work in those vineyards. For this purpose, I do not consider holding grapes in a photogenic basket or raising a glass in a sunset tableau to be work. And at most, 3 of those 400 plus photos show people doing actual labor in a vineyard. And I'm afraid that says something about me and about anyone else who looks at a vineyard with no one working in it and thinks, what a pretty vineyard that is. The delicious and photogenic fruit of the vine doesn't just cultivate and harvest itself, but it is so tempting to look right past all the hard work, time, and sweaty and dirty and unphotogenic people involved to the finished product. Jesus presents a vision of the kingdom of God in which the haves and the have-nots, the expected guests and the late arrivals, the landowners and the tenants, all work cooperatively and with generous spirits. Jesus reminds the Pharisees and us that the faithful work of the kingdom isn't over and done once the final block is placed on the temple or the final vine is planted. What people do and how they treat one another in the temple and in the vineyard matter. In this, Jesus very consciously echoes the words of several of the prophets by using a vineyard setting to illustrate the relationship between God and people of faith. I'll close with words from the 5th chapter of Isaiah, reading in the Common English Bible translation. Let me sing for my loved one a love song for his vineyard. My loved one had a vineyard on a fertile hillside. He dug it, cleared away its stones, planted it with excellent vines, built a tower inside it, and dug out a wine vat in it. He expected it to grow good grapes, but it grew rotten grapes. So now, you who live in Jerusalem, you people of Judah, judge between me and my vineyard. What more was there to do for my vineyard that I haven't done for it? When I expected it to grow good grapes, why did it grow rotten grapes? Now let me tell you what I'm doing to my vineyard. I'm removing its hedge so it will be destroyed. I'm breaking down its walls so it will be trampled. I'll turn it into a ruin. It won't be pruned or hoed, and thorns and thistles will grow up. I will command the clouds not to rain on it. The vineyard of the Lord of heavenly forces is the house of Israel, and the people of Judah are the plantings in which God delighted. God expected justice, but there was bloodshed. Righteousness, but there was a cry of distress. The job description for those of us who call ourselves Christian isn't done once the stained glass window is installed or once we get our conference badge of compliance with COVID-19 prevention protocols. God's grace to us has been abundant. May our real, everyday work reflect joy and gratitude for that every day.